All right, so for those who are just joining, thank you so much for joining us for the first of two application workshops for the Sustainable Communities Program, Call for Applications for Civic Engagement, Equity, and Environmental Justice. And so my name is Hannah Brunel. I'm a senior planner with SCAG, and I will be co-facilitating today's session along with my colleague, Anika Van Isle. And if you're just coming into the room, if you haven't already, please type your name, your organization, and the location you're joining from into the chat feature. This will help us understand who is in the room and also ensure that this feature is functioning for you. And please note that we are providing closed captioning for this session. If you would like to activate or hide that feature, you can click the live transcript button along the bottom menu and show subtitle or hide subtitle. To share some meeting logistics before we dive in, this meeting will last about an hour and a half, and all mics are muted upon entering and during the first portion of this meeting. And so please take care to keep your mic muted when you're not speaking during the Q&A portion. If you do have a question at any point, please feel free to type it into the chat, and we will have an open question and answer session after the main presentation. And if you think of something later, you can feel free to reach out to our staff. My contact information is here on the slide, and these slides will be sent out along with a link to this recording to those who registered to participate in today's meeting. And before we get into the session content, I'd like to offer a brief land acknowledgement. So we are currently on occupied and unceded land of Indigenous people who are and have been the traditional caretakers of the land in this region. I am calling in from the Chumash, Kizh, Tongva, and Gabrielino land. And if you haven't already, we would encourage you all to visit the nativeland.ca to learn more about the traditional inhabitants of the land that you live on. And I'll pass it over to Anika to go over the agenda for today.
Thanks, Hannah. For today's workshop, we'll begin by giving an overview of the program, covering funding objectives, project categories, applicant eligibility, and co-applicant partnerships. We'll then dive into two specific project categories: housing and land use strategies in multimodal communities. Next, we'll discuss the priority populations before covering the application scoring rubric, followed by a walkthrough of the application itself. We'll then give some tips and tricks on what makes a competitive application, as well as an application checklist, timeline, and additional application resources. We'll then open it up for questions and end with some brief announcements about other funding opportunities through REAP. So by the end of this workshop, we hope that participants will understand the application timeline, process, requirements, and scoring rubric, understand what makes a competitive application and feel ready to apply, have an opportunity to connect with potential partners via our Jamboard, which I'll discuss in a moment, and of course, always have an opportunity to ask questions and have those answered. So throughout this presentation, we'll have two check-in polls. The first one here is a quick poll to get a sense of who's in the room. We have two questions. What county are you seeking funding in? And what type of organization do you represent? David, if you could launch the poll, that would be great. I'll give you all about 30 seconds. Seeing those results come in, we have about 60% so far that's participated. Give it a couple more seconds. Awesome. So we have a good portion here from Los Angeles County and kind of split here amongst Imperial, Orange, Riverside, and Ventura. It doesn't look like we have anyone joining from San Bernardino County today, but maybe somebody will join shortly, or maybe at the next application workshop. what type of organizations do we have in the room? We have a lot of local and regional agencies, about 50%, and another about 40% of community-based organizations or nonprofits. We have a couple others of special districts or other. If you're in other organization, we encourage you to, type in, what organization you're representing within the chat. Stop sharing. So moving on, I'm gonna share a little bit about a Jamboard. So SCAG has developed a Jamboard in order to allow applicants to identify potential partners and share their contact information. Some of you may have already seen this if you attended our information sessions back in the fall. I'm going to quickly share my screen. So you all can see. Can everyone confirm that you can see the Jamboard? I think you can. Great. So we encourage you to open up the Jamboard via the link that's been dropped in the chat. Add your information and check out what other organizations or jurisdictions are interested in applying and looking for a partner. In the Jamboard, you can add a sticky note here on the left-hand side where it says sticky note, pop up a little box, and you can add in your name, your email. I messed that up, but your name, I'm messing up here, but your name, your email, your agency or organization, county or city that you represent, and the project category that you're interested in. You can save that and cancel out of that, and then you can drag that wherever you want. As you can see, we have some names that have already been here from the information sessions back in the fall. And if you need additional room, there's also an additional page up here on the top where you can add if you need additional space. We hope that this platform helps you identify potential partners for for your project, and make sure to please only add to the Jamboard if you feel comfortable about sharing your contact information. Stop sharing now. Pass it over to Hannah.
Thanks, Anika. Okay, so since 2005, SCAG has provided resources through the Sustainable Communities Program, providing direct technical assistance to local jurisdictions. And we released the SCP call for applications, prioritizing civic engagement, equity, and environmental justice last Wednesday, April 12th. And you can see the main goals for the program here on this slide. So these include supporting the development of plans to help close the racial equity gap as outlined in SCAG's Racial Equity Baseline Conditions Report. We also look to support a range of eligible land use, housing, and transportation planning activities, and to advance the goals in SCAG's Racial Equity Early Action Plan, really by prioritizing efforts that directly benefit communities of concern, SB 535 disadvantaged communities, and other priority populations, which we'll touch on later in this presentation, and to support and encourage equitable partnerships between community-based organizations and local governments. And so this call includes two funding sources. It includes the Regional Action or the Regional Early Action Planning Grants of 2021, or REAP 2.0, and Senate Bill 1 or SB 1 funds. And so this program is organized into two project categories, each funded with their own funding source. So as you can see here on the screen, the Housing and Land Use Strategies category is funded with REAP 2.0 and has about $3 million in funding available. And so projects funded in this category must be located in an infill area, accelerate infill housing production, reduce vehicle miles traveled, affirmatively further fair housing, while implementing strategies that are outlined in Connect SoCal. And we'll go over more about infill areas later in this presentation. And the multimodal communities project category is funded with Senate Bill 1 funds and has about $2 million in funding available. And projects in this category must also reduce vehicle miles traveled, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and also implement strategies in Connect SoCal. And so whichever project type that you are applying for, robust and equitable community engagement strategies are a required component on all projects and must be integrated into your project scope. And so as mentioned on the previous slide, one of the main goals for this program is to encourage partnerships between CBOs and local agencies. And so historically, the funding for SCP has only been accessible to jurisdictions and agency applicants. And this call is including a new approach, utilizing a co-applicant partnership structure, which really aims to facilitate greater connection and collaboration between agencies, jurisdictions, and community-based partners. And so this allows primary applicants to apply via a partnership with up to 2 co-applicants. And so within this partnership, co-applicants will be compensated to lead key elements of the project through an MOU with SCAG. And in addition to that, a consultant team would be procured to perform work on behalf of the primary applicant while also supporting that co-applicant partnership. And if you already have a partnership in mind, please be sure to visit the Jamboard that Anika demonstrated earlier to provide your contact information. And I'll pass it back to you, Anika.
Thank you. So now shifting into applicant eligibility. Eligibility varies depending on the project category. Some applicants are eligible as primary applicants, while some may be eligible as co-applicants, depending on the project category. So here on this slide, those listed in orange are eligible to apply as primary applicants for both housing and land use strategies and multimodal communities project types. These include cities and counties, county transportation agencies, transit agencies, and tribal governments. Those listed in green are eligible to apply as primary applicants for the housing and land use strategies project type, but they are not eligible to apply as a primary applicant for the multimodal communities project type. These include natural resource or public land agencies, public academic institutions, school districts, special districts, regional housing trust funds, and housing authorities. And then all primary applicants are also eligible to apply as a co-applicant. In addition, those listed in blue under co-applicants, these include community-based organizations and nonprofits, are eligible to apply as co-applicants only for either project category. These must be either a registered 501c3 or have a fiscal sponsor. We've also dropped the program guidelines in the chat, so you can review the applicant eligibility in more detail. So we'll now transition to talking specifically about the housing and land use project category and provide some more information on project examples and specific funding requirements. So some examples of housing and land use strategy projects can include area or corridor-wide plans, policies, or ordinances that support affordable infill housing based in equity, environmental justice, and affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH. It can also include general plan updates and amendments that focus on integrating infill housing and environmental justice goals in support of increasing housing supply and production. Development guidelines and standards, zoning code updates and rezoning for housing element implementation and compliance. In addition, plans to increase affordable housing supply that prevent displacement and loss of existing affordability, as well as infrastructure and utility financing plans. However, this does not include fossil fuel and natural gas.
And so, oh yeah, thank you. So part of the requirements for the REAP 2.0 funding that we discussed on a previous slide, all of the housing and land use strategy projects must be located in an infill area. And so this is defined by the state in the REAP 2.0 guidelines, and the full definition is shown here on this slide. And so I'll read it out for folks. And so infill for the purposes of the REAP 2 program means where all of the following apply. The area consists of unused or underutilized lands and is located within existing development patterns and is or will be accessible to destinations and daily services by transit, walking, or bicycling, and must be located in either an urban center, urban corridor, or an area with transit supportive densities, or the area is an established community that meets all of the following criteria. This includes the area consists or previously consisted of qualified urban uses. The area is predominantly surrounded by parcels that are developed or that are previously developed with qualified urban uses. And this does not include perimeters bordering navigable bodies of water and improved parks, and also parcels that are within or adjoining the area that are classified as agricultural or natural and working lands. And so the state's definition of infill is included in Appendix 3 of our program guidelines, which we linked in the chat. We have also developed a mapping tool that is a resource to help applicants determine if the project is located in an infill area. And we'll provide a demo of this after the next slide. And so this next slide helps to break the definition down a little bit and provides more details on the terms that are used in the infill definition you saw on the previous slide. And this table is designed to align with the eligibility section in the program application, which we will show you and demonstrate in a later slide. So you can see here parts A, B, and C on this table are required, and projects must also be located in either C1 or C2. And so for parts A and B, the project location must consist of that unused or underutilized lands within existing development patterns. And so this means if the land is currently vacant, underutilized, or developed in a manner that would allow for that greater density, and is accessible to destinations and daily services. So this means if the site is accessible or if it will be accessible to destinations such as grocery stores, post offices, public parks, and other key destinations within communities, and daily services by transit, walking, or bicycling. And again, located in either C1 or C2 below. So C1, this would be consisting of unused or underutilized land within those existing development patterns. And so what this means is a place that includes residential, commercial, public institutional, transit or retail use, or any combination of those uses, or an area that's recognized as a main street or central business district, and or it could be a corridor that includes a mix of those uses within walking or biking distance of each other. Or the location could be an established community that meets all of the following criteria you see under C2. So this would mean that it either currently consists or previously consisted of any qualified urban uses. The area is surrounded by parcels that are developed or previously developed with qualified urban uses. And again, not sharing a boundary with an area that is identified as agricultural or natural and working lands. And our staff is available if you do need support in determining if your project location is an infill area. You can reach out to us and we're here to support you. And I'll turn it over to you, Anika, to do a quick demo.
Yeah, so to help determine if your project location, specific for the housing and land use project type, is located in an infill area, we developed a mapping tool that can be one potential way to help you assess if your project location is in fact in an infill area. We do want to note that this map alone does not define an infill area, but it does serve as a helpful tool to support you in preparing your application. So first, let's open up the REAP 2.0 indicator mapping tool. The link will be dropped in the chat, and I will share my screen quickly. So as you can all see, this is the Civic 2.0 mapping tool. We're going to first start by zooming into our project location. So if you go here on the left-hand corner, there's a search function. I'm going to use the city of El Centro as an example. So I can type in El Centro, click here, and it'll automatically zoom into the city of El Centro. Make sure that the entire location of your project is visible and clear on the map. Depending on the size of your project, you may need to zoom in further to focus on your project location, or you might need to zoom out further if it's a larger area. You can X out of the little box there. And then next on the right-hand side, there's going to be a layer list here. You can also, if it doesn't pop up immediately, you can click on these 3 little squares right there and it'll pop it up. We're going to select the infill related layers, which should also be dropped in the chat. That's the SCAG high quality transit areas, the transit priority areas, job centers, neighborhood mobility areas, and livable corridors. So for each of these layers, you're going to want to click on the 3 little dots on the right-hand corner to make sure that the transparency of each layer is adjusted to about 50%. So that we can make sure that all layers are visible on the map. So I already pre-adjusted all these to 50%, but I'll just show you here. It's at 50%. Transparency, 50%. Likewise for the other remaining layers. So once you note that all those are at about 50%, and you can see them all on your map, sometimes the map can be slow to load. So we do want to tell you, please be patient. If it's being a little slow, just take, a pause. Sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating, but just take a second and it'll load. Once all those layers are visible on your map, you can take a screenshot of the overall map, and I'll show you how to save it. I'm going to use the snip tool function because that's what I have on my computer. I'm going to take a screenshot. And then I can save this map to my desktop. And I can label it as applicant name _ project name _ infill. So when I take a screenshot, this will be saved as a JPEG file to my desktop. Be sure to convert your JPEG file, or however it saves as you've taken a screenshot, that you convert it to a PDF before uploading it to your application. And then also please note that if your proposed project does not fall in one of these areas that's indicated within this mapping tool, but you believe that your project area still aligns with the definition of infill as we just discussed, please reach out to Hannah at brunel@scag.ca.gov for additional guidance. Stop sharing now. Thank you, David. So we'll now transition to talking about the multimodal communities project category and provide some examples about the multimodal communities. So some examples of multimodal community projects can include transportation safety or active transportation plans, highway to boulevard and freeway cap plans that can improve non-motorized and pedestrian traffic, community e-bike rebates and e-bike share plans and pilots alongside planning activities, multimodal corridor plans or community-wide active transportation master plans, bicycle or pedestrian master plans, or first last mile plans, park and greenway connectivity plans, or also transportation accessibility and safety demonstration projects. These could include quick build projects alongside planning and engagement activities. As a reminder, multimodal communities projects will be funded with SP1 funds and do not need to be located within an infill area. So what we just showed you with that demo of the infill area is not relevant for the multimodal communities project type. And for more information on these project categories, please check out the applicant toolkit. We'll be linking to this later in the presentation, but this also serves as a helpful guide that summarizes those instructions for the mapping tool, as well as goes into more details for the project categories. This call prioritizes funding in areas that have been traditionally disadvantaged, underserved, underrepresented, and under-resourced. So this includes for this call, SB 535 disadvantaged communities, which includes state and federally recognized tribal lands in the latest update. TCAC, HCD, or Tax Credit Allocation Committee, Housing and Community Development Opportunity Areas. SCAD communities of concern, as well as AB 1550 communities. So that mapping tool that I just showed you, the REAP 2.0 indicator mapping tool, can also be used to help identify where these priority population layers overlap with your project area. So as part of the application, you'll be asked to upload 4 maps in total, each showing a different priority population layer. This is relevant for both project categories, whether you're housing and land use or multimodal communities. So I'm going to share my screen one more time and do another quick demo of what this looks like. And again, if you know, we're giving you these demos, you'll be able to watch a recording of this later after we release that. And also these instructions are available within our applicant materials. So as we demonstrated before, you're going to start by opening up that REAP 2.0 indicator mapping tool. We're going to zoom into our project location. So again, use that left-hand search function. I'm going to do again the city of El Centro. We're going to zoom in, pulls up that project location again. And then on the right-hand side, under the layer list, you're going to select one priority population layer at a time for a total of 4 maps. So the 4 priority population layers include this TCAC HCD opportunity boundary, communities of concern, disadvantaged communities, and the AB 1550 communities. So for this demo, I'm going to show you the disadvantaged communities layer. So we're going to checkbox that. And obviously it shows up all here in color. We want to make sure that transparency is set to about 50% again, so we can see it over our project location. And once that transparency is set, we can close out of these boxes. And then we're going to take a screenshot again. So I'm going to use that sniffing function. Do the same thing as I did before. And we have our screenshot. Next, I'm going to save it. Here for this map, we're going to be saving it as applicant name, project name, PP for priority population map. And then this one is the disadvantaged communities map. So we're going to name it DAC. I already named one of it, but we are going to replace it here, but that probably shouldn't happen to you. And then when you're uploading to the application, again, please make sure to upload a PDF of the map. And in total, you're going to be uploading 4 maps. So 1 with each of those layers. Stop sharing. But to view examples of these maps, please make sure to reference Appendix 1 in the applicant toolkit, which again, I'll share with those application resources later in the presentation, which gives more instructions as well as examples of all of those maps and the naming conventions. I'm going to pass it back over to Hannah to go through the scoring criteria.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this slide provides, go back one slide. This slide provides an overview of the scoring criteria for the project application. And so applications will be scored on 4 major areas. These include project design and outcomes, which is about 40% of the overall evaluation, as well as project need and priority population benefits at about 20%, inclusive and equitable engagement at 20%, and local partnerships at 20%. And so while one application is recommended, applicants can submit multiple applications, and you must rank them in order of priority. And so going into a bit more detail, the application is scored for a total of 50 points. Each question is scored on a 5-point rubric. And the scoring rubric is dropped in the chat for you to take a look at. And so for the next portion of the session, I'm going to do a quick demo of the actual JotForm application and go into each section of the application and each question to share a little bit more about what we're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, so is everybody able to see this? Maybe just a quick nod. Okay, great. So I'm going to start with the eligibility section of the application. So as you can see here, the first question is the project category dropdown, and where you select the project category that you're applying for. And so when applying for the housing and land use strategies section, a second question on infill areas will appear. And if you're applying for the multimodal communities section, that infill section is not required. So just going back to the housing and land use strategies section, the infill areas section asks applicants to determine if the project meets the definition of an infill area as shown here on the slide. And so step 1 is to review the definition and check all of the boxes that apply. And so again, projects must meet parts A through C and either C1 or C2. And you must select if your project is located in an infill area. And step 2 is to determine which of the priority growth area layers overlap with your project area. And you can check this through using the mapping tool that we demonstrated earlier. And so you can select here which PGA layers your project overlaps with. And step 3 asks applicants to develop a narrative explaining how their project meets the definition of infill. And we will be providing more information on how to develop this narrative. It will be available on the REAP 2.0 website to help guide applicants. And step 4, as Anika demonstrated earlier, is to provide that map of the infill area. So I'm going to move on to section 1, project design and outcomes. And so this first section, community and vision summary, this asks applicants at a high level to describe the vision for the project and how that vision is connected to the needs identified by the community. And question 1.2 is funding objectives and sustainable community strategy implementation. And so this asks applicants to provide a narrative explaining how the project is designed to meet all of the funding objectives by project category. And you can see here the funding objectives for each project category, as well as how it relates to achieving the Connect SoCal implementation strategies that are included in SCAG's adopted SCS. And you can see those strategies listed here. And we're asking applicants to really describe in detail how the project is designed to address all of the funding objectives. And then again, how those Connect SoCal implementation strategies will be implemented throughout the project. And the next question here, 1.3 anticipated project outcomes. This asks applicants to really detail the target outcomes by project type, really in measurable terms, and explain how the project is designed to meet those target outcomes, by project type. And you can see here that we list each of the target outcomes for each of the project types. And this last question, scope of work and project feasibility. This is where applicants must download and complete the scope of work and budget template. And so this is linked here in the application for you to download. So we're asking applicants to please upload the completed template to this question and also provide a summary of the tasks and deliverables to respond to this question and how the project is designed to overcome any challenges. And so now I'm going to move on to section 2, project need and priority population benefits. And so this section is divided into two questions. The first question of this section asks applicants to identify which priority population layers the project area includes and to upload a map of each layer as Anika demonstrated. And just a note here that more points will be awarded to areas that include multiple priority population layers. And you can see the instructions that Anika referenced are included here in the application as well. In the second part of this section is narrative based. And so this narrative should include how the project will address and start to repair both current and historic harms, and include how the question benefits priority populations as that relates to mobility, housing insecurity and affordability, and anti-displacement. And so moving on to section 3, this section is focused on inclusive, diverse, and equitable engagement. And so for this first question, we're looking for a detailed description of the approach to community engagement. And you can see here that we've provided an example of what an exceptional description will include. And this question is also where you will upload your 3 required letters of support, and we provide some guidance for how to do that here on the application. And question 3.2, priority population engagement. So this question asks applicants to explain how the community engagement strategies are tailored to engage the priority populations that have been identified as part of the project. So we're looking for folks to demonstrate an understanding of the local context and the local histories, and describe how the engagement strategies respond to that local context. And again, we've included an example of what that exceptional description would include. And this last section of the application, section 4, local partnerships. This first question, reciprocal relationships and impact. We are really looking for partnerships that are mutually beneficial to all applicants. So this includes primary and co-applicants, as well as any additional partners that have been identified and the community at large. And for any other partners that have been identified, we're looking to understand how these partners will be compensated as part of the project budget. And for question 4.2, this question asks applicants to provide a high-level description of the decision-making structure of the partnership. We are looking to understand how the primary applicant and any co-applicants are really working together through the project, how they will make project-related decisions and build trust. And so when you're finished filling out all sections of the application, you can click Review Your Application, and you can scroll through to see if you'd like to make any edits. And when you get all the way to the bottom, you can go back to make any edits before submitting. And you can also, as you're going through the application, you can click Save to save your application and return to it at a later date. And you can enter your email, and it will send you a link over email for you to go back to your application. And then once you're all set, you can submit your application, and it will send you an automated response that your application has been received. And I will stop sharing and pass it back to you, Anika.
Great, thank you. So that was a lot of information, and we recognize that. I do want to also note that there is a PDF version of the application available on the website. So before you embark on the online application, you can take a look in more detail of the program application so you can prep your responses before filling it in. So with all that information, and as you prepare to submit your application, what exactly makes for a competitive application? So kind of most importantly, we're looking for projects that are transformative and impactful projects that are specific to the local context. This means that projects have an impact beyond site-specific boundaries, projects that are maybe area or corridor wide, could be used as a model maybe to implement in other communities and contexts. In addition, we're looking for projects that significantly improve existing land patterns or result in behavior change. Projects that result in a decrease in vehicle miles traveled, create opportunities for people to get where they need to go without a vehicle. They might increase housing affordability in infill areas, as well as create opportunities for people to live closer to jobs and daily services. We're also looking for projects that have co-applicant partnerships with community-based organizations. And we're looking for projects that emphasize inclusive and equitable community engagement. Applicant Toolkit, as I mentioned before, is a great resource for more information on equitable engagement strategies. We'll link this in the application resources later on in the presentation. And finally, we're looking for projects that meet all funding objectives by project type. So as you go through the program application, there are several materials you need to upload as part of your application. We developed a quick checklist here to help make sure that you're ready to submit your application. All of these links will be dropped in the chat. So first, complete that online program application. There is a PDF available on the SCP Siege website if you'd like to get a full view of that application before diving in. If your project works with one or more co-applicants, you may need to submit a self-certification checklist. This only needs to be completed by co-applicants who are nonprofits, community-based organizations, or any co-applicants that utilize a fiscal sponsor. Next, if your project is a housing and land use strategies project type, you'll be required to upload a PDF map of your proposed project overlaid with the infill areas that I walked through earlier. So we provided a quick demo of that, which you can definitely go back to and reference as you complete your application, as well as there are additional instructions within Appendix 1 of the applicant toolkit. In addition, all projects must submit a total of 4 priority population maps. Each individual map will show one of those priority population layers, which is what I had walked through earlier. Applicants must also submit a completed scope of work and proposed budget. So SCAG has provided a template for you to use. And then finally, all applicants must submit 3 letters of support. So additional information on who can submit that letter of support is detailed in both the application and the applicant toolkit. So we dropped several of those links in the chat to the application, the self-certification checklist, the scope of work and proposed budget template, and the applicant toolkit for you to take a look at. So just a quick overview of our timeline. The call opened up last week on April 12th and will be open through Monday, May 15th at 5 p.m. We're currently in the process of holding application workshops, and we will also be holding office hours in the coming weeks. We'll drop the link to the office hours in just a few slides. And then once the call is closed, we will be evaluating applications in May and June. We anticipate that projects will be recommended and awarded in July. And then at late summer or fall, we'll begin developing MOUs and beginning the procurement process. I'll pass it to Hannah for another poll.
Thank you. And David, if you could please bring up the poll. We have one final check-in poll to see how everyone is feeling about applying to the program after listening in to the workshop. So the first question is, what type of project are you seeking funding for? And the second question is, how much do you agree with the following statement? I feel ready to apply. So we'll leave this open for about another 20 or 30 seconds. Okay, looks like we're at about 45% participation, so we'll leave it open for a bit longer. Okay, and maybe another 10 seconds, and then I will go ahead and end the poll. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. And it looks like most folks are maybe not sure about the type of project they're looking for funding. And it looks like most are interested in housing and land use projects, or also potentially both project types. And it does look like most people do feel ready to apply, which is great, with some that might be needing some additional resources. So thank you so much for participating in the poll. And if we can, I'll pass it back to you, Anika, to walk through the application resources.
Yeah, thank you. So for those of you that maybe said you don't feel quite so ready, or for those that already are ready but are ready to get started, SCAG has developed some resources to help you, assist you as you prepare your application. We've mentioned several of these resources throughout today's presentation, including the program guidelines, applicant toolkit, the REAP 2.0 indicator mapping tool, scoring rubric, the scope of work and proposed budget template. These are all linked in the applicant resources section of our website, which we'll link to in the chat. And you can find everything that we've talked about today on the SCP Siege webpage. One resource that I've mentioned a couple times that we really want to highlight is the applicant toolkit. This toolkit can be really helpful as you try to craft a competitive application. In the toolkit, you can review successful and competitive project examples, utilize communication templates to help build out your project team, review materials needed to submit your application, and also view instructions and example images of the required maps. If you're still looking for some additional support, please sign up for our office hours, which we'll be hosting over the next few weeks. These are 15-minute appointments where we can talk about your specific project in more detail. And in addition, keep an eye out for a list of frequently asked questions that will be uploaded to the website in the next week or so. Pass it over for Q&A.
Great. Okay, so now we have time for a Q&A session. We'll first open it up for folks to please raise your hand. Feel free to unmute yourself or type your question into the chat. And also want to acknowledge and thank those who already submitted questions when they registered for the workshop. Once we get a chance to answer some other questions, we will address some of those questions. And we will also be following up with some of you over email where those questions were a bit more specific to your particular project. So yeah, please feel free to raise your hand or type your question into the chat. It looks like we may have had some questions come in already. Okay, so I'm seeing several questions in the chat. So maybe the first question that I see that has come in from House Farm Workers, would you like to unmute yourself or would you like me to read your question out?
If you could read it, that would be great.
Sure. Okay, so in the certification, there's an audit requirement. Is this required for all partners regardless of their portion of the grant money? I may ask either Pontip or Andrew to please help respond to this question if you're on the line.
Hi, Hannah. We're here.
Awesome.
I think for the other partners, we will have to look into it.
Okay, perfect. And just to clarify, they're referring to the self-certification form that the co-applicants are filling out.
Got it. Yeah, we can check and then we can get back to the group on that one.
Awesome.
I'll put my email in the chat also if there's any of the other questions that need to be emailed.
Okay, great. And then your second question, when will funding be provided? So maybe I can go back to the timeline slide. We are anticipating to select projects and get those approved by our board in July. And we will begin MOUs and procurements likely in fall. And we're anticipating projects to begin likely in winter of 2024. So early 2024 is when projects are anticipated to kick off, allowing some time for MOU development and procurement for those projects. And for your third question, for community engagement, what is the time period that community engagement needs to be done? So for this funding, we are encouraging those community engagement strategies to take place during the life of your project. And so, once you are awarded funding, there will be about 2 years for project implementation. And so during that time period, we would anticipate that engagement is done sort of early on in the project and is continued throughout the life of the project. And you can also see we have a timeline that's included in our program guidelines, and that kind of walks you through, sort of the funding dates for this program. And okay, so we are currently surveying and should be done by July. And so maybe if I can just ask you a clarifying question, are these things that you're hoping to include as part of your project scope or include in your program application?
The things that we would like to include in the application, but we want to make sure before we do that they would be done in the time that qualifies. So trying to figure out the date of when the engagement, but you said it sounds like winter 2024. So we'll have to go back and see if these would take place then.
Okay, so applications will be due on Monday, May 15th. So if you are conducting community engagement or have already done so, it would be great to include some of that into your program application. And then, during the time when we're doing evaluation and awarding projects and also beginning MOUs and procurements in that portion of time, then you can kind of also plan to include that in the project scope that will be implemented as part of the project itself.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, great. And I see there's several questions in the chat, and I don't want to miss any that were asked earlier on. Let me just take a look, and let me see if anyone has their hand up. It doesn't look like it. Okay, I think I'm looking at the Sharon Campbell. If the city is interested in transit access and multimodal connectivity, particularly from housing and affordable housing locations, but they don't have an approved housing element, is that a possibility? Sharon, if you're still on the line, would you like to share?
I am. The city does not have an approved housing element, so we're wondering if they can apply for the multimodal. It's a transit agency that's going to provide transportation for the affordable housing to locations in the city, but they don't have an approved housing element. So it looks like that's funded out of SB1, and they would have to have that, and we're just wondering if there's any way around it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is a requirement for the SB1 funding to have that approved housing element at the time of award. We are following the SB1 grant guidelines. And so at least from my understanding, that is a hard requirement. I'm happy to reach out to Caltrans to get more information on, potentially if we could, if they're in progress of being awarded, maybe that could also be something that they would accept, but we're happy to get more information about that.
Okay, so we'll just reach out to you, Hannah, then?
Sure, and we will also be including this in an FAQ that will be posted online. So we're aiming to post that within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes. And from Marina, how would you define underutilized? Would a body shop, strip mall, or a body shop in a strip mall be an underutilized property in terms of an affordable housing project? Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I would recommend possibly scheduling in office hours with us so we could talk about some of those project specifics. I think it would be helpful to learn a little bit more context about that particular project location. Okay, and let me see. So I see Elizabeth, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So so when we put the budget together, right? So there's the city's portion of the budget, there's the CBO or nonprofit portion of the budget, and then there's part of the budget, I am assuming, that would go for this third-party consultant to support the work. How do we include that? Do we include that third-party consulting person's fee in our budget, or is that outside of the $200,000 to $500,000 range that we submit? Like, do we just submit the city budget and the CBO budget, or we have to try to estimate what we think the consulting cost would be to support our project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I was just trying to pull up our scope of work template. I don't know if someone else from our team might be able to pull that up, but so I can provide a little bit more explanation there. So the way that our template is set up is that there's one tab for the primary applicant. And so this will actually become the consultant budget because we will be procuring a consultant on behalf of the primary applicant to support the project. And included in that template, we have already included the overhead and fringe. So that will automatically calculate as part of that budget. And then we are also asking if you do have co-applicants to include, we've had 2 additional tabs where you can specify their project budgets as well. Yeah, thank you very much for bringing this up. So you can see a bit more here. If you go to the primary applicant budget tab, you can see that the, if you scroll over, yeah, so you can see for the overhead and fringe and the fixed fee, those are already in there and will auto-populate as you're filling this out. And then, it will be part of your grant award. So this total budget tab 3, once you have filled out tab 4, 5, and 6, it'll auto-populate and it'll help you understand kind of, how these, the primary applicant and co-applicant budgets work together to make up your grant award.
I have a sort of subsequent question. So what is your vision? Because I see you have funding in here for a community engagement person. What roles do you envision the nonprofit partner playing? Because if you're hiring a community engagement specialist, you may not need that. In my mind, that would be a role for the CBO, but maybe not. Maybe you want to have an additional, so what other roles do you see as viable for CBOs?
That's a great question. And so maybe I'll just say that the labor classifications listed here, these are really examples to kind of get you started, and you can edit those fields to be applicable to your project. But the roles for CBOs that we're envisioning, those can range from leading community engagement, whether that be really local grassroots engagement with the target communities, or, depending on the organization's expertise, they could also lead other aspects of the project. So even leading, some evaluation or surveying, existing conditions. So there could be several roles for a CBO that they could play in this project, really depending on what that partnership looks like, what their expertise is. Oftentimes we do see CBOs playing that really key engagement role, but, it's certainly not limited to that. And we would encourage folks to, engage with a wide variety of organizations with different types of expertise as well. I hope that helps to answer the question. Okay, great. So I'm going to move on to another question I see here in the chat from Adam. How does the term entirely apply to county agencies dealing with housing policy projects, as outcomes would apply to both infill and non-infill areas of the county? Adam, if you are on the line, if you would like to come off mute, and maybe explain your question a bit, I think that would be helpful for our team.
Yeah, I can perhaps explain more, but I think it is in the question, so that were we looking to conduct a study that would apply throughout the county. Obviously, there are both infill and non-infill areas throughout the county, so the project area really is the county when you're dealing with housing policy, right? So how does that apply?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if we have Elizabeth, if you are on the line, if you might be able to advise on this question.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Good afternoon, Elizabeth Carvajal, Deputy Director of Land Use. So the housing and land use components of the REAP of the call for prep funding that are funded by REAP require that any project funded with these dollars promotes infill development, accelerates housing production, and reduces VMT. So as part of your application, it's really going to be critical that you make the case that your project is fulfilling those three objectives, and the infill element is a requirement of those dollars. Happy to talk a little bit more offline, but if you're looking for an overall housing strategy that covers the entire county, that might be a challenge because the dollars are really focused on promoting those objectives, specifically in infill areas. But again, happy to discuss this particular project that you're considering offline to see if there's maybe some nuances that we can talk through a little more.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And yeah, again, our team is offering office hours. And so we can drop that link in the chat and definitely encourage folks to sign up for that if they have project specific questions. And, we're more than happy to kind of talk through that offline a bit. I see a question from Noe in the chat. Can this funding be used to supplement, leverage other existing projects? And so, I would like to learn more about kind of your project scope there. And again, just kind of chat a little bit more about what you're envisioning there. We are looking for projects that do have a distinct scope and can achieve those target outcomes that we went over during the session. And, would have their, would be able to fulfill those outcomes. So it could be kind of leveraging existing projects. Yes, that's certainly would be competitive. But again, would love to kind of learn more about what you're thinking there. So would definitely encourage you to kind of chat with our team a bit more. Okay, and I see the last question I see in the chat is from Ian. Please clarify whether a certified housing element is also required for any of the REAP2 project application, or does SB1 grant requirements applied across the entire program? So yes, for SB1, if you're applying as a local jurisdiction, you must have a approved housing element. And for the REAP2 funds, it's not included in the REAP2 grant guidelines. So that is not a requirement. And I don't see any other hands that are up right now. But again, if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand or type it into the chat. And if something does come up later, you can reach out to our staff, you can reach out to me. I can drop my information into the chat. And also, again, we will share out all of the slides as well as a recording of this session will be posted on our website. So you can always view that later as well. And so seeing no other hands, I think we'll transition into some REAP2 program announcements. If we could please bring back up the slides, and I'll pass it off to my colleague, Alicia.
Hi, everyone. Alicia James, Senior Public Affairs Specialist at SCAG. Just wanted to share with you all a couple exciting updates that we have for the REAP 2.0 program. One is our REAP 2.0 call for application schedule. We're really excited to now share this with you all and have an official schedule. Currently, of course, this program, SCP, as well as County Transportation Commission Partnership Program and Sub-Regional Partnership Program 2.0 are now accepting applications. And our HIP and NOFA programs under the PATH program will be released on Wednesday, May 10th. And the call for application release dates for the RUSH program will be announced after our industry forum. And I just wanted to note that SCAG's full application for the REAP program is still pending the state's approval. And so programs are subject to change based on the state's feedback. Each program has its own guidelines as well as the state. And so we encourage you all to review the guidelines of the programs you may be interested in. And of course, as part of this application process, each program is offering technical assistance in the form of application workshops, such as today, and dedicated office hours. And so all of that information can be found at our REAP 2.0 website. We have a bunch of resources there that could be helpful. And next slide, please. And then finally, our RUSH Forum, which is part of our PATH program. We are hosting on Friday, April 28th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. A regional utilities supporting housing industry forum. We are partnering with PlaceWorks and the Urban Land Institute of Los Angeles to host this event. And we would hope that the outcomes of this forum will help guide eligibility in the delivery of our RUSH program, which will be looking at how we implement basic utility infrastructure that supports housing. So if you are interested, there are options for in-person and virtual registrations, and there is also contact information there as well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Alicia. All right, well, if there are no other questions, we would just like to thank everyone so much for participating today and for your interest in the SCP call for applications. And again, the slides and recordings will be posted on SCAG's website. And if you've registered for this session, you will get an email with these materials. And if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to our staff. I will drop my contact information in the chat. And thank you again so much, and we appreciate your time and participation. And thanks to our great AV staff, David, for your support today.